Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of me trying to find a creative outlet before I go insane. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that is very important, and that, of course, is representation. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is representation? Why do we need it? And is it woke? These are very important questions to ask, but if you work in Hollywood, they're not the most important question. The most important question is, how can I show representation without representing anything? How can I give the impression that I'm an ally without actually having to put any thought into it or, hire somebody with lived experience? That's difficult. That's hard. That might make viewers uncomfortable. You know what doesn't make viewers uncomfortable? A little itty bitty scar right here. Every time Hollywood chooses to show somebody with a visible difference, they have to ask themselves this question. Are scars hot? They have to ask themselves, would people still want to date this actor? Do you guys remember when Jenny Slate had to issue a public apology after stepping down from voicing Missy on Big Mouth? The reason for her stepping down and issuing this apology was that she was a white woman voicing a black character in a very popular Netflix animated series. At least from what I understand, Jenny Slate did not take this role to be offensive. But the problem is, why are we casting white people to voice these black characters? So even though she wasn't intentionally doing wrong, she was still erasing the lived experience of actual black people by playing that character. And it wasn't just Jenny Slate. Kristen Bell, Mike Henry, Hank Azaria, they all stepped away from voicing characters of colors around that time. These guys stepping down represented a small step forward in representation and how we view representation in media. Unfortunately, though, this change that we're hoping for is very slow. A big reason for that is that networks now have to worry about being too woke, which could include anything from showing rainbows, dolphins, gay people, or climate change on the air. I'm sorry if you can hear that, my dog is barking. But there's also another reason, and that is that writers' rooms have predominantly been white men. In 2019, UCLA's Hollywood Diversity Report found that writers' rooms were 68% white and 86% non-disabled. So, even when studios do cast black or queer characters, they're still being written by white people who do not have that lived experience. And what is the result? Tokenism, stereotypes. We've seen them all before. These writers are scared to make a statement because it's not their lives. They're just guessing. So they rely on these token characters, these stereotypes to push forward the story because audiences are used to it. If you want challenging media, watch a documentary. Sitcoms and dramas, they're not meant to push the bounds. Unless, of course, it's Grey's Anatomy, which I could just go on a whole thing about Grey's Anatomy if you let me. Let's put on our scholarly academic caps for a second while I regurgitate some facts and sources I found. In America, after the Civil War, there was a problem. What was that problem? The problem was that there was a lot of people now coming back from war with visible differences. Think of the Civil War with them just cutting legs off and, getting blown up and stuff. People were coming back and they were coming back differently abled. Historian David Serlin notes that post-bellum disability was often sanitized out of public view to preserve civic beauty. So, much in the same way that our nation created the highway system, created neighborhoods to reinforce segregation, de jure segregation, they also intentionally moved people out who affected this civic beauty, the landscape of the city, and moved them to slums and considered them lower castes of people. People with visible differences were seen as disruptive to this ideal of American capitalism that relied on people pushing their bodies to the brink for the boss man or whatever, working 65 years just to enjoy, 10 years with a broken body. In this case, society didn't just look away, it actively pushed people out. It actively ostracized people because they had visible differences. James Partridge, the founder of Changing Faces and Face Equality International, once said, we live in a world which is obsessed with image, with looks, with perfection. And in that world, if you look different, you're immediately judged and usually found wanting. So that's all in the past. Who cares about that, you know? I thought that's why our administration was trying to delete history. It's because it doesn't matter and it's just DEI nonsense. Well, let's cut to the present day and let's talk about how people with visible differences are still represented today. So, in the present day, the face equality movement was founded by the late Dr. James Partridge, a burn survivor who pushed for real, meaningful change. Face Equality International formed in 2018 and now includes over 40 organizations fighting facial discrimination, also known as facism. Now, facism has always existed in Hollywood. If I were to ask you to conjure up an image of the stereotypical Hollywood villain, you probably imagine some East German guy with a scar and a monocle. This prototype was built by Hollywood intentionally to continue to push the message that people with visible differences are also morally incorrect. Scars became a way to show that people weren't just ugly on the outside, they were also ugly on the inside, that these physical differences were manifestations of their internal selves, and that's why it's actually okay to discriminate people with physical differences. I mean, the bad lion in Lion King is literally just named Scar. There are two specific examples that made me want to talk about this issue, and this first one is Ready Player One. Now, if you are unfamiliar, Ready Player One was a book that I actually did read that was later made into a movie. A very successful movie, making a lot of money worldwide. And it is centered around this virtual reality system that kind of runs their society. Everybody's plugged into it, even though in the real lives, poverty and everything is such a big issue. You can be happy in this fake simulated world where you get to make your own avatar and choose how you portray yourself to the outside world. Obviously, this is really appealing for a lot of people because even if you don't have a visible difference in the way that we categorize it, everybody has felt alienated, ostracized for the way they look. Everybody has been in a circumstance where they felt like the odd one out, where they felt like the one that was not fitting in. If you're lucky enough to only have this as a fleeting feeling, then that's good. But the only difference between an able-bodied person and somebody who's differently abled is one moment. Any person can become disabled. The idea that you are immune, that we don't need to support disabled people because it could never happen to you, is the same mentality that we should support billionaires because one day you might be one. It's just not going to happen, Jack. I don't know why I said Jack there, but I'm going to keep it in. Anyway, in Ready Player One, the main female love interest is named Artemis with a 3 for some reason, and it's kind of made a big deal that they have a visible difference that they were afraid to show to the main character. Their avatar is perfect. It's everything they want to show to the world. And in reality, they're worried that when the main character sees them, they won't accept them. Cut to the main character finally seeing the real Artemis, pulling back her bangs in that stereotypical movie moment, and saying, you know what? You're beautiful anyway. Now, if you're picturing him pulling the bangs back and seeing a rather big scar or something that warrants this type of reaction, you'd be wrong. Artemis has what looks like pink eye, just a little splotch over her left eye. Now, I'm not trying to say that this wouldn't affect the way that she is perceived in this world, but what I am trying to say is this is a way that Hollywood can show representation and diversity without actually doing it. Because if you were to look at this actress with her eye makeup on, you're not noticing that. You're noticing that it's a beautiful woman. Like, it's like this is not a thing. This is not as big a thing as they're making it out to be. It is a way to show this tokenism without actually making people uncomfortable. Because if the main love interest actually had a scar that most people would find as gross, how could we fantasize about dating them and kissing them and stuff? We live in an aesthetic culture, and of course this is magnified in Hollywood because it is literally about image. But the people we choose to portray these characters matters. We saw that with people stepping down from voicing black characters. Yet we still don't consider differently abled people and people with visible differences in these conversations. These writers' rooms, there's still a lot of white dudes. Most of the people in those writers' rooms haven't had to deal with the day in, day out effects of being a marginalized person, of being a minority, of being somebody who's oppressed or ostracized. Most of the time, they're just waiting to get out of there so they can go cheat on their wives. It also holds up the idea that Artemis wasn't beautiful until the main male character agreed that she was beautiful. It took him accepting her for her to accept herself, which is ridiculous and backwards. Carly Finley, an Australian appearance activist, said, "Disability is often only included in media when it's palatable, when it's tragic, or when it can be cured or overcome. What we need is presence without condition." Imagine seeing a character in a story with a visible difference or who is differently abled, and that's just a part of their character, but it's not the only aspect of their character. Oftentimes, whenever we see representation of differently abled individuals, it is only through their identity as differently abled individuals. It doesn't even care to look at it through an intersectional lens. Nobody is one thing. We contain multitudes. Now, for the main reason I decided to talk about this, besides the fact that, like I said, without a creative outlet, I am going insane, I want to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar: The Last Airbender is probably my favorite TV show of all time. It has timeless themes of found family, of morality, of Aang having to wrestle with the moral choice between killing another person, even if it would save others. It follows Sokka's journey as he goes from a brash, misogynistic teen into an adult who's super woke and supportive of his sister. Toph is blind, but it is not a disability in the Avatar world. Now, this may border on the idea that if you have a disability, or let's say, for instance, like in media, how it's often been pushed that people with autism need to be savants or need to be expert chess players or something to be valuable. That's not true. Most of us are just depressed. And by far, my favorite character in Avatar: The Last Airbender is Zuko. I know this isn't a controversial take. I know it's probably the most popular Avatar take, but his character arc is my favorite character arc in all of TV. It is truly beautiful how he goes from a young boy, scarred by his father, feeling shame, trying to reclaim his honor, and trying to hide the part of himself that he is ashamed of, the scarred part. But then growing and realizing that the scar is actually the part he wants to embody. That is the beautiful part of his personality. It's a part that has been through something serious, something traumatic, and it survived. It regrew. It came back. And at first, the audience is not surprised to see a villain with a facial difference, as this is pretty common. Research from the Journal of Visual Culture found that 60% of iconic villains in media have facial differences, compared to almost 0% of heroes. Again, they name the lion Scar. The ugly equals evil trope is so common, it has a name. It's called lookism. Zuko doesn't represent molding to that status quo, to that trope. He takes what is expected of him for him to always be ashamed of his scars, and he transforms it into love. He literally transforms anger into love to be able to firebend again. And a lot of that love has to be directed at himself. He has to learn how to love himself again. All parts of himself. I'm actually gonna stop talking about that because I think I might start crying. So, like other people, I was cautious heading into the live-action Avatar remake. For one, because it was made by Netflix, who doesn't who doesn't exactly have the best track record, but also because the last time we tried to get a live action Avatar movie, it looked like this. But I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised. The actors were good, the kid actors were good, which is also something you didn't see in that M. Night Shyamalan one. The effects were good. There was characters we loved from the series. There was still new stuff. It wasn't amazing. It definitely wasn't even comparable to the original series, but it was fine. It was a Netflix show. And then I look at Zuko. Prince Zuko, who looks like he has a black eye. That is not the scar one would get from losing an Agni Kai to their father, from literally getting third-degree burns on their face. That's pink eye. That's a black eye. It's different enough that we can talk about it, but not so different that we have to find him ugly. Which is also weird because it's a kid's show, so why are we worried so much about how hot the actors are? Anyway, Adam Pearson, actor and activist with neurofibromatosis, said, "When you cast a non-disabled actor to play a disfigured or disabled one, what you are saying is, you're not even good enough to play the most marginalized version of yourself." We have enough actors. There's always actors. Hollywood is full of people who can't pay their rent because they want to be an actor. We have people who can fill these roles who have the lived experience. And as we've seen, when we allow directors and creatives with lived experience to actually tell stories, we get much better stories. Before the show even began, by making that choice, it is showing that it is valuing aesthetics over the story it's trying to tell. Now to get personal for a second. I have keloid scars. They're thick, they're pink, and they're on my chest and on my shoulders. I am pretty fortunate that most of the time they're covered by a shirt unless I'm trying to, flex at the local pool, but they've still affected me. I remember feeling shame, being afraid to take my shirt off when I go swimming, seeing people stare at them and ask questions. I remember when I went to basic training and somebody told me I'd be much more attractive if I didn't have my scars. These stuck with me, and they're part of the reason I am who I am today. And my experience is a fraction of the lived experience of people with visible differences and disfigurements that are every day being discriminated against, ostracized, being treated differently. If we do not elevate people who have original stories to tell about themselves, then stories will continue to be told about them. And stories told about somebody else will never be accurate. I think Hollywood is slowly getting better, but I mean, a lot of this bigger conversation is drowned out by the fact that these production companies and stuff are actually just evil. And I haven't seen A Different Man yet, the A24 movie about a person with a visible difference who undergoes the surgery, turns into Sebastian Stan. I'm sure that's going to be good. A24 is a big company, a big production company. It's cool to see that they're willing to tell those stories, but it's still stories about it. Instead of just, maybe sometimes we can also just let people live, People don't have to be defined by their physical characteristics. I understand that movies and TV shows are a visual medium, but we have the ability to tell deeper stories than what's skin deep. As long as we continue to carry forward this ableist body standard, it seeps into every part of our culture. Michelle Elman, author and body confidence advocate, put it best. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You were never meant to shrink to fit their idea of beauty. If you watched this all, thank you. It was genuinely just me ranting. But I think it's important to have these conversations. And if you are somebody with a visible difference or who is differently abled, please sound off in the comments or whatever. I would love to hear from you guys. And I am not trying to claim that I myself have a visible difference because of my keloid scars, but it is something that has shaped me, and it's something that made me want to talk about this. So again, appreciate you for listening. yeah, all right. I'm gonna go see if I can figure out how to upload this to my laptop and edit it.